Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here with some of the palettes that are on the shopping block in my collection. I don't necessarily plan to declutter any of these palettes. I mean, maybe some of them, but definitely not all of them. I just wanted to pick out 10 palettes in my collection that if I had to declutter 10, it would probably be these 10. It's 10 palettes that I either have fallen out of love with. It could be something that I'm not sure about. It could be something that I need to play around with more to just get a better idea of it. It could be something that, I don't know, it just has like the quality has gotten worse, things like that. So I just wanted to include 10 palettes. I'm gonna go through them in no particular order. I'm just gonna go through them in kind of brand order rather than anything else. And yeah, these are just the palettes that I in the next kind of year or so want to go through and like get a better idea of, and then maybe declutter eventually. So that is the video for today. But before I jump into the palettes, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. I would love to have you in the family. But let's jump into the video. So we're gonna start with Anastasia, and I have 3 Anastasia palettes that I want to go through. The first one is a bit of a cheat palette because it is currently my Panda palette, and that is my Modern Renaissance palette. I'm hoping to finish this year anyway, but I wanted to include into this video because if I don't finish it by the end of the year, I will definitely declutter it, or you know, I won't finish it off so I can move it out of my collection because I don't feel like this is a palette that I want to keep in my collection anymore. I really have been enjoying panning this so far this year. There's been no problems really at all. The only thing maybe would be that there's a lot of like similar shades, like these two here, this one here, and even Realgar is very kind of similar tones, very similar depth, which makes it a bit more difficult to pan. But overall, I'm just loving panning this palette this year, but there's definitely a palette that I want to move out, so that is the first palette on my list. The next palette on my list is actually one of my, if not my newest Anastasia palette, but it is an old one. That is the Anastasia Prism palette. I was lusting after this for such a long time. It was just something that I was always on my mind that I wanted to pick up. And then it was discontinued, but I saw it on eBay in really good state. I have since used this palette a lot. You can see there's a lot of pans in here. There was no pans, barely any usage to be honest when I first got it. I like this palette, but it's definitely not my favorite. There's a lot of shades in here that, like the shimmers in here are very kind of, it's a weird formula, it's a very kind of thick formula, very like it's just not my favorite. The mattes are absolutely fine, but yeah, it's definitely a palette that I would probably consider decluttering. I even considered this as my Panda palette, you know, this year or even next year, but I don't think I would enjoy panning the shimmers very much. I mean, I think they would be fine, but there's a lot of things in here that I wouldn't want to pan, like Throne, I don't really like, Osiris as well. They're too deep of shimmers and they don't really like have anything special to them. I don't know, like I probably would pan the rest of the palette though, but we'll see. This is definitely one that is very high up on the list of potentially being decluttered. I might try to finish up a couple shades in here. Like, I mean, Unity would be really easy to finish. Eden would be quite nice. Maybe one of the shimmers as well, like Pyramid or Eternal would be quite easy to finish. But we'll see how it goes. I think sometime soon this will probably be decluttered for my collection, but yeah, it's something that I'm trying to enjoy as much as I can now because it will leave eventually. Next up we have a palette that is probably one of the, if I would have to rank these, it probably would be one of the palettes that are lowest down on the list, like, you know, the ones that I probably would more likely to keep, and that is the Emerisi palette from Anastasia again. I actually really love this palette. The reason why I included it into this list is because it's a lot of repetitive shades in here. I don't know, I haven't reached for this so far this year, but looking at it now, I actually really love this palette. There's a lot of shades in here that I do love. It has one of my favorite mainstream brand shimmers, which is Barb. It's very close to a lot of the indie shimmers that I have. I love that one. I love Anastasia, really nice shimmer as well, Cupcake as well. It has some really nice staple mattes, but these two mattes are too similar. There's a lot of kind of deeper shades down here, like a deeper mattes. The Super Escalators are actually, they're pretty rubbish to be honest. But I love this color story when I look at it like this, but I just forget to reach for this palette, and that's why I included it into this list. So it's one of those that I need to reach for more, and I don't think I will declutter this anytime soon, but I just need to kind of, I wanted to add it into this video to remind myself that I need to reach for this more because it's just one that is a bit neglected at the moment in my collection. Next up we have Colourpop, and I have two palettes from Colourpop that I have on my shopping block at the moment. The first one is actually not a Colourpop palette, like, you know, a pre-made Colourpop palette anymore. It is my Mar palette. I have basically from the beginning I combined Mar and Sol, but since then I have taken out like 1 or 2 shades and added 2 more shades in. But this is what mine looks like now. It's a really nice, like actually perfect summer palette, but I just don't reach for this very often. It's definitely one that I will probably declutter sometime soon. I might depot some of these shades and put them into my singles, but I just don't reach for this as a palette. Looking at it though, I really think I combined a really like pretty color story, especially for summer, but I just don't reach for it, and because of that I think this would be something that I would declutter, and it's something that again I need to just play with more. I don't think I reached for this at all last year, and I haven't reached for it again this year, so if I don't reach for it again this year, this definitely will go, and again I think I would get more use out of these singles in that case, but that is why it's on my shopping block. The next palette is one that I kindly was gifted from my friend Martina. She was declaring it from her collection actually, and she asked if there's any makeup from that palette that I wanted, and I got 2 Colourpop palettes. I got this one and the At First Sight palette. This one is the Lovelies palette. I really love the color story in here. It's a more cool tone palette, it's more mauve tones, and it's really, really stunning again. There's some really pretty shimmers in here, but since getting this palette I actually haven't reached for it yet, and for some reason I just haven't, you know, been kind of drawn to this palette. Granted though that this is more of a kind of, for me, autumn and winter palette, and I mean I could have reached for it in the beginning of the year, but I was just focusing on other things, and I got the Huda Beauty Rose Quartz palette, which is also a mauve toned palette, and I just rather reach for that at that point in time than this one. So it is on the shopping block because I need to just play with this and get a better idea of this palette and see if it's something that I enjoy. And I want to create a couple of looks with this palette, and after doing that I will reassess if there's something I want to keep in my collection or not, because honestly just looking at it, it's a stunning palette, and it's, yeah, it's a good, really nice color story. Again, the shimmers, especially these 2, I mean that's a pressed glitter, but this one right here and this pressed glitter are absolutely stunning shades, and yeah, I just need to get a better idea of it before I make my mind up, but it is currently on the shopping block. So those are kind of like the multiple palettes per brand things that I have. The rest are just one per brand. The first one that I have is my Nikki Tutorials and Beauty Bay palette. This was my first Beauty Bay palette that I picked up. It is the one that made me fall in love with Beauty Bay's formula, and this is what it looks like on the inside. It is a stunning palette. I really, really love the, you know, especially the shimmers, but there's some really nice colors in here, but the palette itself is just a bit, you know, random, I would say. The shades in here don't always necessarily go together, but I really love it still. I don't think, like, when I open it up, I look at it and there's so many shades in here that I want to keep, but again I just don't reach for it. It's not a palette that I like, oh I want this type of shade, I'm gonna reach for my Beauty Bay and Nikki Tutorials palette. I used to forget about it in my collection. The shimmers are here are absolutely stunning. The shade Pride is actually really similar to Barb that I talked about before. The shade All In here is my favorite shimmer in this palette, and it's really, really pretty. Again, it's kind of very close to my indie shimmers. Those are probably top 2 in here. There's a few more in here that I really enjoy, but if I were to declutter this I probably would depot those or finish them up beforehand. But this is definitely a palette that I'm considering decluttering, and again maybe just depotting the shades that I, you know, love in here, and then declutter the rest. But it is definitely a contender to declutter very soon because I don't reach for it anymore, and it's such a massive palette as well. It's probably one of my biggest palettes in my collection. I think it's my biggest palette in my collection apart from my singles palettes. So yeah, it just takes up a lot of space and it's not my favorite color story anymore. The next palette is one that I have raved about so much over the years, but I just feel like I have fallen out of love with this palette, and the formula is just, you know, deteriorating a little bit, and that is my Juvia's Place Magic Mini palette. I have a lot of pans in this palette. This is what it looks like. It's got a lot of use in my collection. I have pan on everything apart from 2 shades, which are like the orange matte and the red matte right here. I used to really love this palette. The shimmers in here are really stunning. I love Nubia and Faso, especially those 2 are probably my favorites. But also like some of these blue and greens down here and like the silvers are really nice as well. But since discovering more indie shades, I don't know if that's because like that's why I don't love this anymore, because it is very shimmer heavy, and that's kind of why I love this palette. But I just don't love it as much anymore, and I'm actually really considering decluttering this palette because I've gotten a lot of use out of it already. Again, this was one that I was considering as my panda palette, but I'm not sure if I want to go through this as a panda palette, because there's a lot of shades in here that I wouldn't want to finish, like the two really deep shades at the bottom, which is actually a deep blue and a deep purple. Again, the matte orange, the matte red would be really difficult to finish. The shimmers, I don't think I would have too much of an issue finishing, but it's mainly the mattes in here that would be quite hard. I mean, the more neutral mattes would probably be quite easy to finish in a year, but again, I'm not sure if I would want to do that, and that is again why it's on the shopping block. We have 3 more palettes to go, again all different brands, but the first one is actually the one that I would say is the least at the bottom of the list, the one that would be least likely to declutter, and that is my Gold Obsessions by Huda Beauty. The reason why this is on the list is because it's just a lot of repetitive shades, and I have these over and over in my collection, but overall this is just a very concise, like I really love this color story, I'm not gonna lie, I really like it. It is very similar to the new light palette though from her, and you know, honestly the only reason why I'm including this in this video is because I needed 10, or like I had 9, and I was like, well, might as well just put one more in so I have 10 palettes on the shopping block, and that's why I included this one. Again, you know, I definitely don't think I'm going to declutter this anytime soon. I have reached for most of the shades this year, so I have played around with it. The only shades I haven't played around with are the 2 mattes here on the center row. But yeah, I do love this palette. It's definitely one that I would consider panning in the future because they are very easy to pan on. I hit pan on this eyeshadow really recently and it's very easy to pan on, but I don't know, I don't think this is going to go anywhere, but it's on the shopping block because it is very repetitive to other things that I have in my collection, and I think I just have to take a step back and consider this compared to other things that I have and then make a decision accordingly. But that is why this one is on the shopping block. It's definitely one that kind of snuck in here that maybe didn't really belong fully, but it is the next palette. Okay, 2 more to go. Next up we have my Sweet Indulgence palette from Sydney Grace. I got this as a free gift with purchase, and I actually haven't used this one yet. I got it last year for their Christmas in July sale, which I mean, I got that stuff in August, so it's been almost a year now since I had it in my collection, and I haven't reached for this once. This is definitely on the shopping block in the sense of me depotting some of these shades and putting into my Seagulls collection and decluttering the rest, because some of these shades are absolutely stunning, but I just think the color story is a bit strange, and since I didn't pay for it, since it wasn't something that I lost it after, I think I am less likely to reach for this one. And I think, yeah, I probably at some point this year will depot this and put them into my singles, because I just have no desire to reach for this as like a whole palette on its own. So that's kind of what I feel about this one. I think I'm going to do something similar to the Mar palette and, you know, put my favorite shades into my single collection and then declutter the rest. So that is the Sweet Indulgence palette by Sydney Grace. Then the very final palette that I have to talk about is actually my Blueberry Muffin palette from BH Cosmetic, and I know this is a very loved palette. It's got so much hype and it is a lovely palette. This is what it looks like on the inside. The packaging is very reflective, so it's hard to show, but this is what it looks like. It is a lovely palette. I really love this one, and it was my Dude You Pan My Battleship palette last year with Martina, and I love this, and there's a lot of shades in here that I really adore, but I think I got so much use out of this palette in that project that I kind of just am a bit burnt out on it. I overall love the combination of these kind of more plummy reddish shades with the blues. It works really well. You also have like a peachy shade on here which also works pretty well. And yeah, it's a nice palette, and the quality is definitely, you know, really good, like probably like perfect almost, like it's really good. However, I am just a bit burnt out on this, and I just haven't reached for it since. And looking at it, I don't really have any desire to reach for it right now. Again, this is more of a winter palette, so maybe when winter comes around I want to reach for this again. But I just think after that project I need a bit of a break from this palette, and hopefully I will fall back in love with this again in a couple months time. But that's the reason why this is on the shopping block. So those are actually the 10 palettes that I wanted to include in this video. Those are the 10 palettes in my collection that is currently on my shopping block. Yeah, I don't know which ones of these are going to be decluttered and which ones are going to stay. I think some of them are definitely going to leave my collection maybe end of this year. I think just realistically, I think maybe 5 of these will leave my collection. I think these 4 will definitely leave. My Modern Renaissance palette will hopefully be panned by the end of the year, and then otherwise I think I will declutter it. I think also my Prism palette will probably leave at the end of the year, because I just don't love that palette anymore, and I don't think I will miss it very much if I declutter it. I also feel like these 2 palettes will be, like I said, decluttered and take my favorite shades and put them into my singles collection, so I think these 2 will go as well. So that's 4, and then I think maybe I will declutter a 5th palette. I don't know, it might be one of these 2, to be honest, either my Magic Mini or my Nicole palette. Probably my Magic Mini palette, if I'm being honest. I think this is less likely to stay because I've already gotten so much use out of it, and I think the formula is just a bit outdated and I think it's getting a bit old, whereas the Beauty Bay palette has some really nice shimmer formulas that I really love. So I think this is more likely to go, but I think hopefully by the end of the year around 5 palettes will leave my collection, so I can downsize it a bit more. But that's it for today. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if any of these palettes are in your collection, if you really love one of these, or you know, if you disagree with me on any of these. And also let me know if you have any palettes currently that is on your chopping block or something that you're considering decluttering. But yeah, that's it for today. I really hope you're having a lovely day wherever you are, and I'll talk to you in my next video. Bye guys.